And one question, the movie Deceived, I love that movie.
Did you?
Yeah, and I love the change, the character that you did in that film.
Yeah.
How often do you struggle about what movie you should do next?
I don't struggle at all. It's either right or it's not right. You know, I mean, a good drama is a good drama. Good comedy is a good comedy. It's really about the work, you know. It isn't about planning. There's not enough offered to me anyway that you sit down and you go, gee, which one should I do? Yeah. You know? I mean, the material has never in my entire life come in like that. It does for Kurt, it does for Stallone, it does for Kevin, it does for a lot of men, and it does for certain women. But never did for me, ever.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of an interesting career that way.
You know, it's funny, I interviewed Chevy Chase a while back. I was in the movie Foul Play with you.
Oh, yes?
I was an extra in the big opera house
scene. No kidding! That is wild. I love that. Were you watching The Mikado?
Yes, yeah, the opera house.
Yeah.
In your career, how often do you find actors who are struggling coming up to you and asking you for advice about how they should plan their careers?
Well, often it does come up. Not very often. Not everybody has the nerve to do that. But I don't have any answers to them other than just to be tenacious and be realistic about whether they think they have any talent or not. There's nothing worse than a 30-year-old guy still chucking around trying to be, you know, one of the young studs on the block. It just doesn't work. You've got to start, you know, a little bit earlier and look at yourself and say, nah, it's too hard. I don't think I've got it what it takes, or I think I do have what it takes. But be real.
You know, Goldie, I got a question about your dad. Now,
yeah.
Your father was a musician.
Yeah.
Who performed at the White House
yes.
and embassies. Were you ever jealous of that? And did you ever get to go to the White House and see him perform?
No, I never did, and I was never jealous of that. And actually, I made a picture called Protocol because Daddy would come home and really give us the true scoop. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to make a movie about this. And I did. And it was all dedicated to him, and it was inspired by Dad's sort of jaundiced look at the social scene in Washington.
Well, I have a question about your dancing career. At the World's Fair in New York, the Texas Pavilion, that's got to involve cowboy hats and boots, right?
No, I was a can-can girl. So I was kicking my leg very high and doing lots of cartwheels and sitting on men's laps and, you know, doing a lot of that. And then after that, I did a go-go number. I swore I would never live through that show. It was the toughest show I've ever done. No, but you know, I mean that's true athletic stuff. I mean, I thought we just none of us could catch our breath.
Oh, Goldie, surreal places you worked at: Las Vegas, Nevada, the '60s. Were you ever amazed at the unusual people that you met when you worked there?
No, Las Vegas wasn't the most surreal place I ever worked.
Oh, where?
I was basically a go-go dancer, and I danced. I got a gig in New York, and I was in a cage. It was the first time I'd ever been in a cage, and I remember dancing, and with all my heart. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and then I looked down, and there was a man who had his nose up against the glass, and I was selling, like I was in show business, you know. And I looked at myself, and I went, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And this man looked at me, and I went, "I don't think I belong here." At that time, the guy who owned the restaurant came up to me, and it was some dive. And he said, "Huntington Hartford wants to have you have a drink with him at the bar."
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, I don't do that. I'm a dancer." And he said, "Well, that's what's expected of you." And I said, "Well, I quit." And I walked out of the bar, and it was that was a very surreal experience.
Think how different your life would be if you'd married Huntington Hartford.
Oh, God. I mean, think about the
first
options.
You'd be rich, right?
Huh?
Well, you know, this movie has a lot to do.
No offense. Yeah.
Well, this movie has a lot to do with traveling, and I'm often fascinated when actors, celebrities travel on airplanes. When you're trapped on an airplane, like Steve, what do you do if you're on the plane? The guy next to you says, "Hey, Steve, I was a wild, crazy guy too," or Goldie, "I watched you on Laughing."
Yeah. It can be a little difficult because I don't like to talk about my past much, as this bores me. So it's very hard to get into those conversations. But people are very, polite on planes, and I'll sit and read, or maybe I want to talk to them,
I feel the same way. I think that if I got someone, and I have once or twice in my life, who won't stop talking, I will say to them, "I wish not to speak anymore." I have things to do. And that's all you need to do. Usually they're pretty respectful.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much. A pleasure
Okay.
seeing you.